Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. We're going to give another minute or so to let folks filter in, and we'll get started momentarily. Thanks for your patience. Just another minute and we'll get started. It's great to see everybody here tonight. Thanks for joining us. All right, why don't we get started? So good evening, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Steve Fontes, and I am the manager of the Civil Service Resilience Initiative here at the Environmental Protection Network. To give you a bit of history, EPN was formed in 2017 by a handful of former EPA staff who wanted to continue their passion for preserving human health and the environment. And now we have over, or approximately, 800 former EPA career staff and political appointees who volunteer their time in a variety of ways with us. Some of those ways include providing technical assistance to frontline communities, commenting on policy and rulemakings that are coming out of the agency, mentoring current and former EPA staff, as well as students and applicants, and speaking with the media, to name a few. The Civil Service Resilience Initiative started last January, and with it, we strive to assist current and recently separated EPA staff as best we can. And some of those services include mentoring, connecting folks to legal partners like Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility and the Government Accountability Project, and creating a fellowship for former EPA scientists and engineers whose work was stopped during the current administration. And this fellowship just launched this week. We're able to support 14 fellows for 3 years. So we're very excited about that initiative. And then lastly, by providing programming on subjects like whistleblower rights, how to create an environmental startup, and various job searching skills webinars like tonight's. I'm going to ask that you please hold all your questions for the end. We will try to have a Q&A session using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And EPN, just so you know, could not do any of this work without the assistance from our fantastic partners, and Green Jobs Network is one of those partners. And with that, I would like to introduce you to the founder of Green Jobs Network, Leonard Adler, who will walk you through how to accelerate your green job search. Leonard.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Give me one moment to get the slides up. All right. Everything good there on the AV?
Looks great.
All right, great. Thank you, Steve. So definitely want to thank Steve and EPN for having me here. I want to thank all of you taking time out of your busy morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, kind of tuning in to this. Really appreciate that. And whether or not you're part of the EPN network or you're new to it, again, really glad that you're here today. So we have a lot of things to cover. So we're going to set some frames at the beginning. One, as Steve mentioned, this is going to be recorded. The slides will also be available because there is a lot of ground to cover. I'm going to do my best to make sure we have a few minutes for questions. I'm originally from New York, and so depending on if we're getting closer on time, I may go to my kind of 1.25 or 1.5 speaking. So this is the basic structure of what we're going to cover this afternoon. So we're going to have foundations, kind of laying the groundwork for things. Going to have a lot of specific tips and strategies in part two. And I think we all know that AI is really, it's everywhere. So I think it's important for talking about careers and jobs. It's important to at least talk about, acknowledge, and cover at least a little bit about AI. So there's some of that in there. And then there's a closing. So there's really two primary objectives for the presentation here. One is to give you principles, things that you can keep in mind whether you're doing an active search today or you're going to do another search down the road, principles when you're doing your job search. And the second point is what I just mentioned, which is that really kind of here to give you practical tips and resources and strategies for your job search. I'm going to be covering a lot of material in addition to obviously the recording. There's links to, I'm going to be showing a lot of screenshots, mentioning a lot of resources. You can find them all the time at climatechangejobs.com. There's a career hub tab in the top part of the page. You can just click through there. You'll see lots of links to resources that I'm going to be covering here. And by way, just a brief background, I'm going to talk a little bit about my kind of bio as we kind of go forward. But I've talked about green jobs and provided support for green job seekers in a lot of different forums over many years. So keeping in mind we're in this foundation section. So one thing I just want to briefly comment on is a definition. There's not any one standard, US or global definition for quote a green job or climate job. So just want to mention I may be using some of these terms, green, climate, sustainability, a bit interchangeably, just to be transparent about that. And then from a definition, just want to share what my own definition, is, and that's really full-time, part-time, or internship opportunities that provide a positive social or environmental benefit. And it can be in many sectors, renewable energy, energy efficiency, conservation, and so on. Obviously, in any sector, public, private, nonprofit, but part of my own definition includes things like fair trade, which we'll talk about in a moment, right? So there's lots of different, for example, various government agencies. This is a report from the UK. They did a pretty big report on clean energy jobs projecting to the future. They have their own specific definition, right? So different entities will have their own definition, just shared mine. In addition to what you might, let's say, usually expect, I mentioned things like fair trade. So if you go to the supermarket, see a little fair trade insignia, fair trade from my perspective, certainly there's planetary benefits, but to me, kind of at the heart of it is how people are treated. Are they being paid fairly for what they produce? And so that's part of my broader definition of green, just to, again, be transparent about that. So now the rest of what we're going to cover in the foundation section are really three themes. I mentioned one of the objectives here is to give you some themes or frameworks. So the first theme is that there's many pathways to make an impact. And depending on where you are, kind of joining us today, you may be kind of on one part of your journey. You may be thinking of going in a different direction with your journey. So I'm kind of here to basically tell you there are a lot of different ways. There's no one perfect path. There's no one right way. It's really what makes sense for you. And I'm going to illustrate this by using myself as a case study. So in the course of my career, I've worked in a number of different sectors that you might describe as, social or environmental impact in different ways. So I'm going to just briefly give you examples of things that are potentially you might describe as very different subsectors. So the first are human needs and economic opportunity. And kind of before jumping into that one, I kind of give you a little bit of background as to the why behind that. I think we all have our why, and to the extent you're engaged in a job search, I'd encourage you to kind of take time to think about your why. That may be helpful to discuss in your cover letter or in an interview. You certainly may get asked this, why specifically are you interested in this? So for me, I'm part of my own upbringing. My family grew up in a pretty low income environment. Was fortunate enough to go to Stanford for my undergrad, and kind of it was at school where some of I'd say the seeds were planted to turn some of the challenges that my family experienced into something positive. So we were covering things in the class, kind of topics and issues that resonated with what my experiences were. And I thought maybe there's a way I could use my opportunities to make a difference, as it were. So that's kind of some of where I'm coming from. And so mentioning on human needs and economic opportunity, when I was a law student, I co-founded the first law review in the country that focused just on issues relating to poverty. It's still being published at Georgetown many years later. So another sector I've worked in is law and justice. So I have a law degree. This is an example of a national nonprofit I've worked for, Equal Justice Works. Had a chance to do trainings with students across the country. I'm in the internet sector, trying to help make legal information and access to the law more widely available to people. So these are examples of places I've worked for. I've also worked in sustainable business. There's a national nonprofit called Net Impact that has student chapters where people who want to use business as a force for good. I had a chance to work for them. I'm also a running coach and have done things in race directing on the side as well, and have been doing some things regarding helping promote more trauma-informed practices. So those are multiple different sectors, and obviously the reason I'm here today with you is green and climate jobs, since I've obviously been working in this sector. So I've just ran through 4 or 5 different fields, and some people know me from one, some from another. So my work in Green Jobs Network goes back now more than a decade. This was one of the early events put together. You may be familiar with some of the websites. There's a live job fair produced things like that. So we're going to talk a lot more about Green Jobs Network later. So that first theme is that there's many pathways to make an impact. The second theme is trying to hold both these concepts, is to be realistic, but also be optimistic if you're searching for jobs in green and climate. So the reality check, the economy's tough. We even know, nowadays there can be even more challenges on entry level work. So regardless of whatever the published unemployment number is, it's a tough economy out there. It's hard to find a job. So that reality check, I think it's important to acknowledge and stay grounded. Yet at the same time, if you're interested in working in green and climate, there's reasons to be optimistic. And from a macro standpoint, really that this article that I've clipped out there, I think says it as well as I could, which is that these are large growing trends that are unstoppable. Right. So if you think ahead, is there going to be more solar energy in 10 years or less? Are there going to be more electric vehicles or less? You understand kind of the trajectory. And to give you some quick illustrations of this, right? So when I started doing Green Jobs Network, you really couldn't buy an electric vehicle. And now we know obviously there's millions of vehicles produced around the world, and with those millions of vehicles, there are jobs behind that. Same thing in renewable energy. Without giving you lots of charts, these are just a couple of quick things to call out, right? So in the US, just last month, the largest renewable infrastructure project has now come online, right? So you have like gigawatts of, I believe, wind energy that's now online and being kind of connected up to the grid here in California, for example. So largest ever, just done. Obviously, there's jobs behind that and obviously to maintain it. This is again article just from in the past like week or so, right? Regardless of some of the other macro economic challenges taking place, solar power is soaring. So these are examples, illustrations in terms of the optimistic component. Another example here, I'm just kind of drilling down. This is a quick chart of the energy mix in California through the California Independent System Operator through gridstatus.io. Took it about a week ago, where I've highlighted on the chart, you'll see basically 3/4 of the energy in California at that time I was highlighting was provided by solar. That doesn't even account for wind and some of the other renewable energy. So again, compared to 5 or 10 years ago, maybe not the case, significant now, and it's only going to increase. And then later in the day, right, I moved the slider over, right, the sun is set, you're seeing the number one energy source is actually being provided by batteries, right? So that's an example, again, of something else that's growing, and as well as wind. So again, there are reasons to be optimistic. Same thing behind these. There's jobs behind it. Kind of called that out. Here's some charts that illustrate growth in general in the clean energy workforce. Again, if you look back to today, and again, you can project out that these are generally unstoppable trends. So then the last kind of overarching kind of principle is that within this broad space that we're talking about today, green and climate jobs, there's a place for you in it. And so a couple of things just to kind of dive into this a bit. So one is you can look at, there's a variety of whether you kind of workforce studies or occupational studies that kind of break down where are jobs today in these spaces and where may jobs be in the future. So this is one example from a study done in Massachusetts. And again, without going through all the numbers, the point here is really there are a lot of different kinds of jobs. It's not all one role. It's not just only installers. It's not only all scientists. And so it's not only all sales. There's a mix. So if there's something that you're good at or you're interested in, there's a place for you in the space, right? So this is from Massachusetts. This is a national study. This was done in the UK recently, as well as they're projecting into the future, where there are opportunities. So there's a diverse range of opportunities when we're talking about green and climate from an occupation standpoint, as well as if you look at from a sector standpoint, it could be you're really passionate about water issues or sustainable agriculture. So there's a lot of depth to all of this. And again, if you're curious about exploring pathways, there are a lot of organizations that provide whether it's profiles or stories or ways that you can learn about different pathways. So as one example here, the North American Food Systems Network twice a year, they do a really great in-depth free webinar series over multiple weeks that actually gives you illustrations into different kinds of roles within this. It could be something in the public sector, nonprofit sector, private sector. So there are a lot of ways that you can explore, and we'll talk about this more, where you can find your place in it, but there's certainly a place for you, and you're definitely needed in these spaces. These are examples of job fairs. So these were one from last year in Cali, PA. This is one from this year. And for those of you who are kind of either students or on campuses, I'm seeing more and more career fairs, career expos take place at universities across the country. So those kind of covered our foundations. We did definitions, some broad themes, and now we're going to dive into some practical job search kind of tips and resources as we talk about exploring and searching for jobs. So the first thing I want to create a bit of a distinction for you to reflect on, kind of on your own, which is kind of which phase are you in? Are you in an exploration phase or are you in a search phase? And to explain, by exploration, I mean that you don't exactly know yet what you're looking for. And so you're in a discovery process. You're trying to figure out, what exactly do you want? Where is there a fit? Where there may be opportunity for you? So you're going through a discovery process versus search. Kind of define that as you know what you want and you're just trying to figure out how to get it, right? And it doesn't have to be so kind of separated. Like you can actually be in more than one of these in any given day, right? Or between weeks and things like that. But for whatever way you're spending your time is to at least be mindful of which of these are you in because they do imply different kinds of work in certain instances. So we're going to briefly just talk about exploring. So if you are kind of in an exploration kind of place, these are just some things to think about as to what kind of how to make the most of that time. You may actually have the time to do this right now. So these are some things where you can structure some of that. So you may decide, all right, you want to actually explore what sector or what issue do you actually want to work on. You might have been working in one and you want to work on another, right? So it can be work on food systems and now you want to work on clean energy, right? Same thing with job function. There's a lot of different job functions, right? Everything from marketing, sales, science, and so forth. You may be trying to explore what function do you want to actually do in your job. And then there are other things in terms of kind of what are you doing on a daily basis? Do you like working with information? Do you like working more with people? All right. And same thing in terms of kind of what overall environment kind of do you like working in a small startup environment? Larger organization? Do you like being outside, for example? So being able to kind of explore these different elements, if you have the time to do that, I would encourage you to take advantage of that. And then in tips, and we'll take a look at a couple things in a moment, but so kind of high level tips, obviously doing your homework. If you have the time to explore, make sure you do research. Obviously, we have the tools these days where you can research just about anything very quickly, right? But then also kind of get out there and do things. So go to events, you can participate in communities, whether or not even you're a student, tap into resources at your school your alma maters. As I mentioned, there's both career fairs, there's more and more resources that schools are bringing to bear in these fields. And then it's also the discovery process is ideally an experimental one where you're actually doing things, you're trying things out. And then it's important to then, okay, you did the experiment, you tried this thing out, take time to reflect. What did you learn from that? And then I think as important as anything kind of I've mentioned so far, it's really important to take time to listen to your intuition, kind of pause, find a way to have some quiet, as it were, because there's so many things these days where there's more distractions. It's hard to pay attention to our intuition or gut instincts. So make sure you take time to do that if you're in exploration phase. And so just to give you some examples of this, so when it comes to mention go to events, participate in communities, there are some obviously marquee things like Climate Week, New York City, and there's obviously Climate Weeks in lots of locations. Trying to highlight things that are coming up, right? So this is going to be happening in a couple months, right? But beyond kind of the broader climate weeks, if there's a particular issue you're really passionate about, so let's say you really care a lot about the built environment, same kind of thing. There are both marquee events and then smaller ones, but obviously, this is a big, the Greenbelt Conference coming up again in the fall, an opportunity for you to really dive in and explore that way. Right. And it doesn't have to only be large conferences. So, for example, if you told me you were in the kind of Bay Area and you're really passionate about water issues, right? There's an event coming up in the fall, Water Summit. And then there's also a monthly meetup group where people get together and there's networking and other things like that. So, definitely, there's lots of events, big and small, for whatever it is that you're passionate about or want to explore. And then same thing on campuses, I've just to mention that again more. Climate weeks, it's not only happening in kind of in cities and so forth, campuses, these are just a couple examples of things coming up on the calendar. This is in Pennsylvania, this is in Michigan, as examples. And if you are really interested about things in higher education, there's a great kind of hub for all this. It's ASHE, and so you can kind of look into things at universities nationwide. Mentioned communities you can participate in. This is an example of one of them. There's many different kinds, online, offline communities that you can get involved in as part of your exploration. So now we're going to move ahead. We have a lot of things to cover here about searching, right? So we've talked about, okay, you're in exploration phase. Maybe you figured, okay, this is what I want. Now, Leonard, help me go figure out how I can go get it, right? So the idea here is to really give you more tools for your toolbox as you're doing your search. So we're going to cover things in kind of three broad categories. One is job boards, and I'm mentioning internship fellowships, leveraging LinkedIn, and then access what I kind of described the hidden green job market. So a couple things, just starting out with job boards. So kind of the point here is if you were giving advice to anyone who is going to find a job in any sector, take those things you'd suggest to them and then apply it to your green job search. So you may say, hey, you're looking for a job, go to a big job board like Indeed, right? They're not the only one, but they're obviously a big one. So the point about that is things that are applicable to any job search are also applicable to a green job search because an employer, if they want to reach a big audience, they might use one of these broad sites. So if you actually go to Indeed and you run searches for conservation, sustainability, things like that, you will see active listings. So don't forget what you already know about that. But then specifically for our world, there are a lot of different dedicated sites specifically to serve kind of our community. And I kind of define this in a few different ways. There are broad-based green and climate job boards. They're ones that focus just on a niche or slice or issue within all of this. And then there are things that overlap, like the nonprofit sector, and we'll take a look at that. So, and again, as I mentioned, Green Jobs Network maintains a list, 20, 30, 40 or more job boards across. So don't feel like you got to take notes on all this. But just to give you an example, so broad-based job boards, Green Job Network runs one of them. There's more than 20,000 jobs on it. But if you mention, well, I really am passionate about water issues. Is there a job board for me? And the answer would be yes. And there's more than one. This is an example. Josh's water jobs. All they have are jobs relating to water. And if you said, that's great, I did an exploration. What I really am interested in is impact investing. Well, I'm like, well, guess what? There's a job board just for you as well, right? So this is an organization that has a job board just focused on the impact investing world and so on. So regardless of the issue, the niche that you're interested in, you can find one or more career sites, job boards that focus just on roles in that. So, and again, Green Jobs Network maintains a list of those. Then I also mentioned that there are things that overlap, with green, right? So if things like the nonprofit sector, clearly, there are a lot of nonprofit jobs that relate to green, but not everything. And so, but the point is that look to that also to surface opportunities. So Idealist, leading job board for the nonprofit space, same thing. They actually have added, believe now, or they may have had this before, but that you can actually do a specific toggle for environmental sustainability roles at the outset. So in addition to, you don't have to worry about keywords as well. So you can use these sites, nonprofit sector, there are other nonprofit job boards to surface opportunities as well. Mention internships and fellowships. Just to call it a couple of quick things here. I am seeing more and more places that actually have dedicated internship programs where they may provide even financial support so that employers can offer opportunities. So these are things that are being done, for example, through statewide organizations or institutions. So in this case, the Mass Clean Energy Center is one. NYSERDA in New York is another one. So there's both these broad ones. They run cohorts every year if that's something that you're in a place of looking for internships. Green Jobs Network runs a specialty internship website where we try to aggregate this and certainly share those out regularly. And same thing with fellowships. I run parallel site for fellowships, and this is just to call out examples of fellowships. And when I'm talking fellowships, I'm talking about things that provide paid opportunities. And because the issue, one of the things I think is really important both for internships and fellowships, why they're so important is that they help a bit address the entry problem, right? So it's so important to get that first opportunity so you end up having that experience for your next job. So as much as possible, Green Jobs Network tries to highlight internships and paid fellowship opportunities. And just to call out one, just because it's open right now. I think the deadline for priority is like mid-August. So Fuse, they partner with local governments to place senior executives, and so they have about 30 or so fellowships in their next cohort. I think around 10 of them are kind of specifically around environment, sustainability, or clean energy, and others focus on other aspects of social impact. And so their fellowships right now are open as well, and those are all paid opportunities like the other fellowships that we try to highlight. So that's kind of job boards and resources there. The next thing I mentioned want to cover is LinkedIn, because to me, LinkedIn is I think there's always room to tap into it more, kind of from a job seeker standpoint. So going to pause for a moment, and this is it's not going to get graded, but I'd ask everyone to maybe take a moment and jot down exactly if someone asks you what is LinkedIn, what would be your kind of one or two sentence answer to that. And so you can either write it down individually. I don't know, Steve, if people want to put it in the chat, they're welcome to do that as well. But just take a quick moment, just give you a few seconds to think about that. And I'm going to take a quick peek if there is anything in the chat that people are posting. Or actually, maybe. It was okay. Steve, do you mind? Is there anything in the chat that people are writing down?
Yep, we've got social media, we've got a professional networking site, business Facebook,
Okay.
um, yeah,
Okay.
professional dating app.
Okay. All right. I'm going to skip that part, but a number of those things. So great. Appreciate people. And it's also good to know people. Some people are paying attention. So I'm going to tell you kind of if someone asks me how I think about it. I've kind of what's a good presentation without coming up with some frameworks, right? So here's kind of what I call kind of the power of seven, for it. And so when I think about LinkedIn, I actually think of it as different things all under this umbrella and company called LinkedIn, right? So one thing it's in a sense your professional presence. These days, it's kind of like your resume, right? People ask for your LinkedIn as much as their resume. So it's your public facing professional presence from a picture you have to your academic record to your, work history and so forth. So your professional presence. Second thing, it's a job board and recruitment platform. And again, I think the answers that you called out, Steve, I think people are touching on a number of these. So it's a job board, right? So as job seekers, we can use it as a job board, and from employers, they use it for recruitment. That's a key part of LinkedIn's revenue engine. It's also a social network. Someone called that out as well, right? So it's simply, even if you weren't using it as a job board, it's where you can connect with other people, right? It's also a business directory. So many, many, many organizations, the same way that it may be your individual presence as a job seeker, it's actually a professional presence as an organization. You may go look them up, right? Look up the nonprofit, look up the government agency, look up the business, look at their company page on LinkedIn. It's also a publishing platform. LinkedIn gives people tools where you can publish, for example, your own newsletter or long form articles. It's also a learning platform. They have lots and lots of courses you can take. And it's also a marketing and sales channel to promote a variety of things. So it's a lot of different things. We're not going to spend all the whole session on this, but just want to call that out. And so for a couple of things. So one is as a job seeker to think about how you can use it. And so I've tried to track examples for each of the seven, what you might do in furtherance of that, right? So if you're a job seeker, that first dimension, think about how you can use it to present a compelling profile about yourself. As a job board, use it to find opportunities. As a network, use it to build your network. As a business director, you can use it to network and research things and even to help you prep for interviews. As a publishing platform, you might use it to build credibility, and so on. So there are a number of different things, ways you can think about it. And kind of, I think what I would suggest, and I'm going to go deep on one or two dimensions of this, is by kind of listing all these different dimensions. I think to me, one takeaway is that I think like with anything online, much less any social platform plus, you can end up spending a lot of time on it, right? And time is your most valuable resource. So to kind of think about with all those different dimensions I noted, kind of how you want to use your time. You may say, I'm going to spend an hour a day on LinkedIn, and here's what I'm going to do. On Monday, I'm going to work on my profile. On Tuesday, I'm going to, run some searches for jobs and so forth. So just think about that, and hopefully that framework is at least a little bit helpful for you. So I'm going to actually use the framework for now, what we're going to talk about next, which is using it to find jobs. And so towards that end, we're going to really talk about three of the seven elements that I called out. So one is thinking about it as a job board, as a social network, and as a business directory. So we're going to kind of jump in. So there's a key part of what we're going to talk about here has a goal in mind, which is to evolve your feed. We know like on any social platform, we have feeds, there's algorithms, we don't see them, we don't know exactly how they work. We just see the result of the feed, right? And I don't have any inside information exactly how their feed works, but I have certainly I can give you some tips that can help you surface more jobs, which is kind of the point of kind of what we're talking about here right now. The whole point about hidden jobs, right? Which is things that might not always be like just there on a job board. So to describe what I mean about transforming your feed, these are some examples. And today, there's an app. I briefly opened the LinkedIn app, bunch of things. My first few posts, green climate jobs, right? So these are examples of kind of what ideally you want your feed to have as more of, if you can, which are people, sharing jobs that you see, right? So it's not even something we had to go find something. Something is coming into your feed and things that are highly relevant to you as a job seeker for what we're talking about, right? And not only, is it helpful to kind of see these jobs being shared, but one benefit of these specific kinds of things being shared is that you may see, content like what's highlighted here, which is that not only is it simply a link to a job, but some of these may include things like contact me if you're interested, right? So kind of breaking through that How do we connect up with someone at the company? How can we get noticed? Things like this. If your feed can surface more things like this, where people in your LinkedIn network are sharing things like this, or you see them in your feed, this is very valuable where you actually have someone calling out to say, yes, feel free to contact me about this opportunity. And so this is kind of what we're striving for. So in addition to people, want to call it same thing with organizations. These are examples of things that I've seen in my feed where organizations are, I'm seeing posts, we're hiring, right? So I don't know if it was on a job board, but I certainly saw it in my feed. So this is kind of what we're aiming for. So to describe exactly tips that kind of help arc things for you in this direction, the way I would suggest thinking about it is really it's the power of your network on LinkedIn. And so there's things that your network, depending on who's in your network, the things that your network does influences what you see, right? That's kind of the key point here. So this is an example of a post I saw in my feed, and it came from a first degree connection. So if your first degree connection posts a job, good chance you'll see it. So this is an example. So thinking about, okay, do I have recruiters in my network? Are there people in my network who post jobs and things like that? Something to reflect on. That's one. If someone posts something, you see it in their feed. But also there's many, many people obviously aren't directly hiring. But one thing that happens on LinkedIn, people may have other interaction with content. So someone may share something. They may share a job that they're not hiring for, but they share it. I do that regularly, right? So this is an example of a cool job at Apple, right? And someone who's a first degree connection of mine shared it, reposted it into LinkedIn's parlance. And so that's how it ended up in my feed. So if your first degree connections repost, good chance you'll see it. Same thing, even if they didn't repost, if you have other interaction with a piece of content, so if you simply liked it, that may also trigger something where it ends up in one of your connections feeds. So this is an example. This is a job working for the T in Boston. One of my first degree connections liked it, ended up in my feed, for example, right? And same thing, pages, same thing. It could be if a page does that same behavior, things like that. So the power of your network, who's in your network, that has a big effect of what you will then end up seeing in your feed. And then things you can also join groups. Things that happen in posts in groups can end up in your feed. So Green Jobs Network runs a group where people are posting jobs. It's free for people to do that. So you can imagine some people do that. So specific action steps for you, I'd encourage you to try to do if you can would be connect and follow people and people that can hopefully be in furtherance of what I was just showing you, people who maybe either are recruiters or who reshare jobs, things like that. And same thing with pages. It could be there's an organization that, whether or not they're hiring today, you want to kind of stay on top of what's happening with them, whether for future research or maybe they're hiring going forward. Same thing, follow those pages. And then with groups, join groups. I think you can join up to 50 groups on LinkedIn. So find ones that are going to be relevant to what we're talking about and do that. And if there's interest, I've actually thought about creating what we kind of call like starter packs. So if the question is, hey, I want to do this, but I don't really know who to follow in sustainable agriculture or in solar, things like that. If there's kind of demand for that, I may kind of put together, here's some people to follow to kind of help you kind of accelerate that, kind of helping you evolve your network on that score. Then the other part of LinkedIn I'm going to cover, and then we're going to have one other major section here on the tips. So is about job alerts. So to me, I think this is I think it's an asset that LinkedIn has that there's I think always room to tap into it more. And kind of the tagline I have here is if you can run a search for it on LinkedIn, you can set up an alert for it. And so what's powerful about alerts is that LinkedIn is doing the work for you. You don't have to run the search, every day at different times, things like that. So basically, you can define searches either with LinkedIn's traditional search or with their new AI kind of job search tool. Whatever search you set up, you can then basically toggle an alert. And then there's a way you can manage your alerts. You can have up to 20. I have a bunch of alerts and I see cool jobs regularly, and some of those end up getting shared out. So to illustrate exactly what I'm talking about here, so this is an example of a search I did. It was clean energy in New York. You'll see different job results there. At the top, there's a toggle, and you can simply turn that on. If you turn that on, that search has now become an alert. And so then you will see that the results of that search or new things that match on a daily basis. That's one example. Another type of way you can trigger an alert. So let's say you go to an organization's page. Here's Earth Justice. If you go to their company page on LinkedIn, click on the jobs tab and scroll down, there'll be something that says show all jobs. If you click that, you'll get to a page that looks like a search result page. And it is. It's basically set up, but just for Earth Justice. Same thing there. You can turn that toggle on, and then you're just going to see new jobs from Earth Justice. And as you see kind of here on the screen, there are a lot of different filters So whether you're doing it for an organization or for a keyword or whatever, what location, you can create all kinds of filters here. So it can be, you can even have things that are combinations like this or that. For example, salary ranges, all kinds of things. So there is a lot you can tap into with alerts, set them, and let LinkedIn do the work. I get job alerts regularly, and there's some good things that I generally see surface from that. And this is just one example. So kind of what does it look like? You may get notifications, but you'll get emails delivered to your box. And so this is an example. I have an alert set for social entrepreneurship. These are examples of some listings. So now we're going to cover a bunch of things here, and I may need to go to a little bit like 1.25 speed. So hopefully you can it works for everybody here is the hidden job market. So the things we just were covering and the LinkedIn portion really it relates to this in that things that may be shared, and I see this, they may not be posted on a job board. Sometimes some of the things that I see get shared is simply a PDF job description that may not exist on the organization's website, right? So we've already started to talk about this topic, but we're gonna spend even more right now, because again, I think the job boards is kind of the lowest hanging fruit, and not everything is on a job board because an organization may not want to spend the time to post. They may not have the financial resources to do it, and so forth. And so we're going to cover some additional things here, right? And so the first tip here is what I would call going direct, right? Because if it's on a job board, the company did the, or an organization did the easy work. They actually went kind of to you. This is kind of go to them. And the point here is really think about who you'd want to work for. Think almost like a sales rep, kind of who's on your target list, make a list, and then just go to their websites and see if they're hiring. They may also have like alerts that you can subscribe to on their site to be notified of new opportunities. But to basically, this is more basically about being proactive. And to give one example, and I'm going to bring something here from the public sector, right? Let's say you're really interested in working in the public sector on energy policy issues here in California. The California Energy Commission, if you go to their website, and you look on their job section, they're hiring, right? But they may not be posting on job boards, right? So the point more is you can, go look at, go check them out regularly. They actually looks like have a way you can actually subscribe for future opportunities and things like that. So this is an example of when I'm talking about going direct, what it looks like, right? The next are job newsletters and email lists. So again, this is I'd say a plus where places will actually compile jobs in different ways and send them to you instead of you having to look at job boards as well. Many of them are free. And to highlight, there's two different ones on this page to call up. So one is if you're interested in food systems, Tufts has something called Com Food Jobs. They have a free listserv you can subscribe to. And Green Jobs Network, publishes a newsletter with more than 200 jobs every couple weeks. So those are examples of things that are free, and there are other things like that out there. Then the next couple tips here I'm going to cover. So this is what I call follow the money. So if you were like, well, where are jobs today, and also maybe where may they be in the future, whether or not they're on job boards or not, I would say find out where the money's going today. That's where the jobs are going to be. Maybe some now, but also as time is passing. And so we're going to kind of talk about this a little bit more now. So the question you would say, if I say follow the money, well, that sounds good. Well, how do I find out where the money is or where it's going, right? So there's some different resources that can point you to. So this is an example. This just came out within the past week. There's different organizations that will do, they'll either do them on a kind of a very frequent basis, or they'll do kind of roll-ups on quarterly, mid-year, annual basis. So I'm going to show you examples of both that will actually pull together and document where is the funding going in these spaces. So this is an example from Currents. One of their products is something called CTVC, Climate Tech VC. So they just did a comprehensive report on climate tech investing for the first half of 2026. So to give you an example, this is an example of the data that's in there. So a lot of data. The high level point also is that the funding increased about 50% year over year for the first half of the year. They break it down by different sectors. They'll also indicate, who got the most funding, top deals and things like that. So if you can figure out, okay, who got the funding, then I'd go to their websites and find out, are they hiring now? Keep an eye on them for hiring down the line. This is an example of things, that's much more frequent than quarterly or semi-annually. So the same organization I just mentioned, they have a free newsletter. In each edition of the newsletter, they'll have deals of the week. This is an example, the most recent one. So again, from a job seeker standpoint, if you were looking, if there's something here that catches your, eye from a location, from a topic area, I would go to the website, find out, are they hiring right now? Keep an eye on them for down the line. But this is where there's money here, there's going to be jobs down the line. And then other sources to follow the money. These are just some examples. I kind of also, as a little corollary, if you want to follow the money, also follow the news, right? So CTVC is one, Heat Map, Insight Climate, Latitude Media, Grist, Canary. Those are just some examples of news sources where you may hear about a place that just got funding. You might hear about a place that just announced they're going to open a new factory for batteries or things like that. So this can help you uncover where money and investment is going, and that's jobs. And these may not be on job boards, kind of bringing us back to how these may be quote hidden jobs. And to give you kind of a specific kind of case study here, right? So this was about now a year or two ago. Form Energy, there's a lot of money that's spent there, investment that took place into Form Energy for a new kind of battery technology, right? So then if you kind of look ahead in there as time passed, then their batteries were hitting the grid. And so today I went and looked, are they hiring? They are more than 100 jobs they're hiring. So we kind of think about we were following the money. Don't know how many jobs they had when that announcement first came down, but by keeping an eye on that, we clearly were able to identify someone who has an employer that has jobs, right? So that's kind of to give you an example of by following the money, you can then uncover additional jobs. Then kind of a little bit related to this is to follow the startups. If you can identify startups, they may have some jobs now, but also to the extent that they grow, they'll have more. So same thing, like how we were able to figure out how we follow the money a bit, right? Through some of these news sources, for example. How can we find the startups? So these are, I'll give you some examples right away here. So the first, there are actually some job boards that are startup specific. They're not necessarily climate specific, but they will include climate the same way nonprofits will. So Well Found used to be called AngelList. They're a job board just for startup jobs. You can set up alerts for things that you're interested in, potentially uncover opportunities that may not be kind of on your traditional job board. This is an example of other startups. This is a pullout from that CTVC report. So again, keeping an eye on startups that are coming through there. And then more specifically, being able to, if you can identify funders as well as incubators, accelerators, that can help you uncover startups, right? So Greentown Labs are the largest climate tech incubator, right? So if you actually go to their site, there's lists of these incubators, you can find them. You'll be able to see who's in the incubator, who are the members of this, and then all these potentially could end up being leads for you in finding jobs, whether it's today or down the line. Right. So the kind of Greentown Labs is an example of kind of an incubator accelerator. Same thing when it comes to investors, right? So if we think about, okay, there are nowadays dedicated investors who they fund specifically things regarding green and climate. If we can identify who those funders are, just like we looked at with the accelerators, we can find out who are they funding, who's in their portfolio. Those are the startups, and then we can potentially uncover jobs. So this is one example, Energy Impact Partners. So one of the things that I've seen now with more of these funders that makes it much easier from a job seeker standpoint is what they've done is they've created what I kind of call like a portfolio career site, right? So whoever's in their portfolio, they've created a specialty site that has jobs across all of their portfolio companies, which makes sense because the key thing that these investors want to do is not just help them with capital, but also with talent. That's equally important for success. So as compared to you as a job seeker having to go through 20, 30, 40 portfolio companies, go to their career site, so forth, they pulled them all together, right? So in this case, we have more than 1,000 jobs from many companies that you can search from one place, right? So these portfolio career sites, Green Jobs Network has that on our list of job boards. We include links to these portfolio things as well. All right, so we still have a little bit of time, so we're going to spend a few minutes talking about AI, and then we'll wrap, and then we'll have, I think, some time for questions. So a couple of things as we get started with AI. So I think to kind of mention what we're going to cover and what we're not. Clearly, AI has implications, for climate. And I would say right now, for purpose of what I'm going to cover, the intent behind this is really what can I do to help you as a job seeker navigate this world of AI? So that's more the lens that we're going to be taking a look at here right now, because I think certainly from when I first started Green Jobs Network, AI was not on the scene. AI is clearly affecting so many aspects of the world that we're in, and it's also having specific effects on jobs as it relates to the fields that we're in. So we're going to kind of cover three specific dimensions here. First, talking about specifically AI and your job search. Then the second thing is really from a jobs standpoint, which is again a key part of why I'm here today, is to talk about how you can uncover job opportunities. Is that this AI moment actually there are job opportunities specifically for green and climate because of it. So I'm going to talk about that. And then also thinking about both as jobs, but then even thinking about opportunities you may want to get involved in down the line is that efforts that are being done to use AI in service of climate as well, just to touch upon that. So we're going to cover a bunch of these things. So first, when it comes to AI in the job search, and keep in mind the things I'm going to cover probably could be its own full presentation. So these are going to be as a very we're going to just kind of go through a couple things here. There's lots of ways, people here today may already have been using AI in your job search from researching, organizations to helping you with your resume cover letter, all kinds of things. People may be using them today. So Green Jobs Network, is trying to help job seekers in that regard. So everyone's job search is unique. Everyone has personalized questions. And so Green Jobs Network has created a AI climate career coach because I can't answer all the questions 24/7. So people can use that through both the website, and the app. Also has created tools where you can come up with everything from questions to help you prep for an interview, help you review your LinkedIn or a cover letter, things like that. So these are examples of tools, but people are using them kind of across the board to use AI to help you be smarter in your job search or to help you get more work done in the context of your job search. So there are a lot of things that are happening there, but really kind of as important, if not more so, is really thinking about, and I'll just mention this briefly. So Green Jobs Network also has a way you can now use with AI, pull in the jobs from our kind of climate change jobs job board into Claude. So if you wanted to kind of find ways to query the jobs in there to kind of help you understand maybe what trends are happening or what common requirements there might be, you can pull that in. So just going to briefly, we have an MCP for that. Happy to give people more information. Just going to kind of skip through that right now. So but really, as equally important, if not more so, is what does AI mean when it comes to being competitive in the workforce? And so there's a lot more to say about this. I'm only going to touch upon it briefly, but I would encourage you to think about three different dimensions. And certainly it may not be true, equally true for all kinds of jobs at any point in time. But I think the trend is certainly it's going to become much more table stakes to know AI to be competitive in the workforce. And so I think about it kind of in three kind of blocks. So one is just kind of basic AI literacy, right? So that's something here where you're now seeing things happening at scale. This is now the state of California realizes it's important. You're seeing, lots of different institutions realizing that it's becoming essential to be competitive. So what does that mean from a workforce development standpoint? So you're seeing like this is actually free. It was just announced a pilot project, free offering so that people in California can get some basic AI literacy to make them more competitive in the workplace, in the workforce. So there's kind of a basic literacy. Then I would actually kind of go up a level and think about what can you do to be not only kind of basic literacy, but fluency in that. And then you can imagine another level on top of that where you have kind of mastery of AI. And it doesn't mean the same thing is true for every role you're going to think about, but a period of time ago, people might not have thought, okay, I have to have fluency in using various, online tools or certain software or things like that. But that clearly changed over time where it becomes essential to knowing how to use everything from collaboration software, potentially design software, depending on what your, field is in. So same thing here, thinking about how you can develop your own skills and competencies in AI is, I would just say, I would encourage you to do that. So now there's two last things we're going to cover here, and hopefully should leave us about 5 minutes for questions. So the next thing is what job opportunities are unique to this moment? And moments change. So the moment I'm talking about today may not be the same moment in a year, 2 year, 5 years, but just commenting on the moment right now. And the moment right now is that there is a huge amount of money being spent in this global AI development effort, right? And so a term you may hear is hyperscalers for these very big companies. And also you may hear a term CapEx, capital expenditure. So the amount that the hyperscalers are spending on CapEx in the context of AI is enormous. It's a lot of money, right? It's almost unprecedented, maybe with things like making the national highway system or something like that. And to put it also in context, it is the amount of money being spent is similar to the GDP of many nations. So there's a lot of money being spent. And so again, we're going to bring it to jobs for us here, right? So right now, the key thing as it relates to this money, this investment, one of the key bottlenecks right now is about energy. It's people talk about needing to get more chips and so forth, but as important, if not more so, is energy, which is more energy connecting to the grid and so forth. And in the context of what we're talking about here, there are specific job opportunities as it relates to this, and I'll give you some examples. So GE Vernova, they're one of the largest energy companies in the world when it comes to things like wind turbines, for example, and other things. So this is a snapshot where they talk about how much more money they are investing to build factories and more jobs that they are creating because of that. So this moment that I talk about, that's connected to these jobs that they're announcing in this investment. Same thing. This was just announced this week, right? So Google and Cypress Creek announced that they are breaking ground on the largest solar project ever, right? And so the reason behind that is the moment I just talked about. So things like this, there are jobs that are going to be coming online because of this, right? So energy, both the creation of energy, transmission, storage, things like that. Part of this broader AI, what's happening with AI as relates to what we're talking about, there are unique job opportunities, unique in terms of demand for them or interest in them right now. And so the way I think about, and there's two parts of kind of this moment. So I've been talking about kind of what I would define as upstream, right? So before you're actually using anything in AI, how is AI actually coming online, right? So think about it as upstream jobs and basically think of it as energy and power. So these are different kinds of jobs across the things, whether you're talking about generating energy, talking about transmitting energy, issues around how these data centers that are happening, how can they be sustainable? And I've seen job postings along these lines. So upstream job opportunities for AI. So the upstream part as it relates to power. Another recent example, this was just announced in the past week or two in Sacramento. Companies making an investment for kind of a battery, a technology, grid storage. They may announce an investment, 200 plus jobs, $90,000 jobs in the Sacramento area just announced because of this. So these are examples of real upstream jobs from that. Some more examples, there's other companies in this space. Fervo, they do geothermal. They've recently gone public. You go to their website, they're doing a lot of hiring. Another example, Bloom Energy, they've seen a tremendous increase in their demand because of the things we're talking about. Again, they have ways to bring energy online with their technology, lots of hiring as well. So there are a number of jobs unique to this moment that are what I would describe as upstream from AI. Right. And there's also now you're seeing things like training programs where there's incentives that people can get upskilled to the extent you want to get involved in these spaces. So and then I think I'll be able to get us done in the next 2 or 3 minutes. So then the other piece here I want to call out is what I call kind of downstream, right? So as AI is coming online, organizations have to figure out how to use it, how to adapt, what to do with this. And so to do that, this work is customized. It's not one size fits all. So this work to help organizations learn, adapt, and transform because of this, those are new job opportunities that did not exist a couple of years ago. And so to give you some examples, Anthropic has this Claude Core. These are 1,000 fellows going into nonprofits to help them kind of navigate these issues. These are examples. I see this regularly across many kind of organizations. So without going into a lot more depth on this right now, there's downstream basically helping organizations learn, adapt, and use AI. And that's in, in the nonprofit sector and in any sector you can think of right now. Then the last thing here briefly here is that AI is being used in different ways to advance climate goals. And so there are opportunities in that. So climate change AI is an example of an organization that does grants, and you can see examples of organizations they're supporting. These are examples of there's a different organization where they're using AI to help protect the environment or wildlife, right? People realizing AI can be used to come up with ways to actually help sustainable energy as well and could potentially create some breakthroughs there. And then at a high level, these are just some examples of things that are being done right now and organizations that are doing things, i.e. potential jobs that are being done in that. So then the last thing here, I want to move from talking about AI to things that are, frankly, a bit more human to close things out. So, and that's what I call a sustainability of the self. And so there's really just one or two kind of key points to mention here, which is that I think we're all really here today because we care about the world around us. And so I think that is admirable and noble. But what I would say is, while the world needs more care, so do each of us, right? And so obviously, kind of if you're engaged in a job search right now or will be soon, it's challenging. There's no other way to say it than to simply acknowledge that. And so when you're engaged in that search, the most valuable resource for success in that search is yourself. And so with that, what I'd encourage you to think about how you can integrate prioritizing your own health and well-being into the job search process. So I think it can be commonly viewed as, oh, I don't have time for that. I have to get out one more resume. I have to go to one more networking event. I have to do more things. And your own health and well-being sometimes can be viewed as kind of as an add-on or not worth it as much. And so I'm here to kind of encourage you to think maybe a little bit differently and say, the more you invest in your health and well-being, the more successful you'll be in your job search. It's the best investment you can make. And so, that may mean when I talk about health and well-being, it may be something different for everybody, here today. It could be, a variety of things, just to call out things that can be your physical health, your mental health, financial health, your emotional well-being can mean something different to us and can mean something different at different points in time. And so, regardless of what being healthy looks like to you, again, the point is really to simply prioritize it. That's the thing. And so, make some time, carve it out, and then use the time and then do something. Whatever it is you do, just make sure that you're actually doing that. And I would say it'll be not only more successful for you and your individual job search, but I think collectively, kind of the healthier kind of we kind of are able to kind of treat ourselves and take care of ourselves collectively, I think we'll all be successful in creating a healthier planet. So with that, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Appreciate that. I know kind of went maybe a couple minutes, but thankfully we do have at least a few for some questions, and certainly there'll be ways you can contact me after. So thank you again for your time and attention.
Thank you, Leonard. And everybody, if we don't get to your questions, I do encourage you to link up with Leonard on LinkedIn, and I just dropped his LinkedIn profile in the chat there for you. He's very reachable on that platform. But Leonard, do you have any advice as far as how to begin a career in the higher education sector?
I'm assuming the question relates to sustainability in it.
My background's in higher education. Any suggestions or advice on how best to begin a career in that sector?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're interested in careers in higher education, I think the first place I'd actually suggest is the one actually included in the material today, which is ASHE. I would just do a deep dive into that organization because they're a national network of sustainability in higher education. And so, if let's say someone's a sustainability director on campus, they might very well be part of that network. And so without knowing their full membership structure, there may be ways you can network through there. So then you can end up getting maybe informational interviews. There may be kind of other groups you can join, conferences. You may be able to even start reviewing examples of, hey, here are different job descriptions, because they actually also share job sustainability and higher ed jobs. Just find out what are they looking for, and then you can potentially identify here are things that you may need to do to get yourself into a position where you're as competitive as possible. So actually be a great start. The other thing might even be just to connect up with your either alma mater, or if you're not in that location as much anymore, other universities there to find out, are there ways you can network at these climate weeks I'm talking about, or find out other needs that they have, but kind of also just leverage the place that you're in as part of that process.
Excellent. Thank you for that. What's your advice, Leonard, when job boards and networking don't open doors into like climate tech? This person spent years in content marketing and strategy and has been searching for a new role for over 8 months. And so far, it's been very rare to discover remote or hybrid roles in the climate companies. And then networking through groups like Work on Climate, Climate Action Tech, et cetera, haven't been fruitful either. So this person is not sure what to try next.
Yeah, I think some of that may involve kind of a little bit more of a personalized discussion. What I would say, it can take time. That story you've shared, you're not alone in that. It can take time. And I also think depending on what's happening, I'd say climate tech can vary a lot in terms of what is, kind of being funded right now, what was funded, where is a particular, let's say if they're a startup, how far along are they on their path? Are they doing a lot of hiring? As much as you can just simply still stay connected, stay in the loop about what's being supported. I gave examples of, probably many of these companies, maybe they weren't around 5 or so years ago, and now they're ramping up because suddenly what they offer, there's a huge demand for it. So trying to keep your finger on the pulse of what's in demand. And then also, to the extent you can still also do in-person networking as much as possible as well. I think a lot of times can really help kind of like just break through things, because it's one thing to have 20 inbound message requests. It's another thing where you can actually spend time talking to someone in person and then being able to kind of build that relationship that way. So I'd encourage that as well.
Excellent. So We are at time, folks. I do apologize. We weren't able to get to all of the questions in the Q&A, but I do encourage you again to connect with Leonard on LinkedIn. And again, for your convenience, I did drop his LinkedIn URL in the chat. And you will all be receiving a copy of this recording so that you can play it back. And if he's gone over something a little too fast, you've got this resource at your fingertips. So Leonard, thank you so much for everything that you've given to us tonight. We will be looking forward to doing more sessions with you in the future. And folks, thanks so much for attending. I hope that you have a fabulous night and we will talk with you very soon. Thanks again.